We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, entitled General History, Chapter 4, entitled Drumila, Explain the Incarnations of God. Text number 6. Dharmasya daksha huhitarya jin ajanishta murutyam narayano nararishi pravara prashanta Naiskarmya lakshananubhacha chachara karma Yodya pichasta rishivadya nisebitangri Rishivadya nisebitangri Yodya pichasta rishivadya nishevitangri Dharmasya daksha duhitarya janishta murtyam Narayano nararishi pravara prashanta Naiskarmya lakshananubhacha chachara karma Yodya pichasta rishivadya nishevitangri Dharmasya daksha duhitarya janishta murtyam Narayano nararishi pravara prashanta Naishkarmya lakshananubhacha chachara karma Yodya pichasta rishivadya nishevitangri Please chant. Dharmasya daksha duhitarya janishta murtyam Narayano nararishi pravara prashanta Naishkarmya lakshanan ubhacha chachara karma Yodya pichasta rishivadya nishevitangri Dharmasya daksha duhitarya janishta murtyam Narayano nararishi pravara prashanta Naishkarmya lakshanam ubhacha chachara karma Yodya pichasta rishivadya nishevitangri Dharmasya daksha duhitarya janishta murtyam Narayano nararishi pravara prashanta Naishkarmya lakshanan ubachachachara karma. Jodhyapichasta rishivadya nishebitangri dharmasya. The wife of Dharma, Daksha, Daksha Duhitari, by the daughter of Daksha, Ajanishta, was born, Murtyam, by Murti, Narayana Naraha, Nara Narayana, Rishi Prabaraha, the best of sages, Prashantaha, perfectly peaceful, Naishkarmya Lakshanam, characterized by the cessation of all material work. Uvacha, he spoke, Chachara, and performed karma, the duties, Jaha, who, Adya api, even today, Cha, also, Aste, is living, Rishivarya, by the greatest sages, Nishevita, being served, Angrihi, his feet. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nara Narayana Rishi, who is perfectly peaceful and is the best of sages, was born as the son of Dharma and his wife Murti, the daughter of Daksha. Narad Narayana Rishi taught the devotional service of the Lord, by which material work ceases, and he himself perfectly practiced this knowledge. He is living even today, his lotus feet served by the greatest of saintly persons. Purport. It is understood that Nara Narayana Rishi spoke transcendental knowledge to the great saintly persons such as Narada Muni. On the basis of these teachings, Narada was able to describe Naiskarmyam, or the devotional service of the Lord, which eradicates material work, as mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam 1:3-8. Tantram Sattvatam Achasta Naiskarmyam Karmanam Jata. The Atma Swarup, or the eternal form of the living entity, is devotional service to the personality of Godhead. But our perception of our eternal form is covered by a material concept of life, just as our normal understanding of our life is covered by a dream. Naishkarmyam, or the cessation of material work, is possible only by the devotional service of the Lord, as stated by Narada Muni himself. Naishkarmyan apyachuta bhava bharjitan no shobate jnanam alam niranjanam. Srimad Bhagavatam 1:5-12. The process of transforming ordinary karma into Naishkarmya, or transcendental work, is summarized by Srila Prabhupada in his commentary on this verse spoken by Narada Muni. Quote, "Fruitive work, in which almost all people in general are engaged, is always painful, either in the beginning or at the end. It can be fruitful only when we made subservient to the devotional service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita also it is confirmed that the result of such fruitive work may be offered for the service of the Lord. Otherwise, it leads to material bondage. The bona fide enjoyer of the fruitive work is the personality of Godhead, and thus, when it is engaged for the sense gratification of the living beings, it becomes an acute source of trouble. End of quote. According to the Matsya Purana 3.10, Dharma, the father of Narayana Rishi, was born from the right breast of Brahma and later married 13 of the daughters of Prajapati Daksha. The Lord himself appeared from the womb of Murti Devi. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Shrimate Romapada Swamin Iti Namine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirveshesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripasindubhyaevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. Thank you so much for being here. Also, thank you for being here. You've been coming quite regularly now to the classes. Yeah, that's a wonderful thing. Very much. We have a city of 3 million people, and how many people come to hear the Bhagavatam regularly? The glories of the Bhagavatam is something that has been established in our lineage, in our tradition of bhakti, as 5 of the most important things that we conditioned souls have to do in this material world to be able to elevate ourselves to our constitutional position. These 5 things are the chanting of the holy names, Nama, the worship of the deities, the hearing of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the association with devotees, and if we have the opportunity to live in a holy place, Dham. In general, when we speak the Srimad Bhagavatam, following the speaker of the Bhagavatam, Srila Sutta Goswami, to the sages of Naimisharanya, Srila Sutta Goswami starts this narration by reciting this verse. Narayanam namaskritya naran chaiva narotama devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayat udhirajet. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. And then he says, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, and then unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Now, in 2024, we have the opportunity to go into a yatra to the places we went with His Holiness Ramapat Swami to different places, and the idea was to go to Badrikar Ashram. We never made it there, unfortunately, because of severe weather. But through the yatra, we listen the classes of His Holiness Ramapat Swami Maharaj and His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Swami, speaking about this very subject matter, this holy place, Badrikarashram, which is situated very high in the Himalayan mountain region. And that is the place that is presided by Narayana Rishi, who is an avatar of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Now, when we speak about the Bhagavatam, we understand that yes, we offer obeisances. Ramapat Swami and Srila Ramapat Swami and Srila Bhakti Chaitanya Swami, they brought up this point during this yatra, during this pilgrimage, in the classes. Why? Why Narayana Rishi has been mentioned in this invocation before reciting the Bhagavatam? Actually, this is what Srila Sutta Goswami say. Before reciting the Bhagavatam, we should offer obeisances to Krishna, Lord Narayan, to Narayana Rishi. We understand Saraswati as a goddess of learning, and we understand Vyasadeva, but why Narayana Rishi? And they explain the reason. Narayana Rishi are the presiding deities of Badrikanashram. That's where they reside. That's their abode. And they're worshipped there by all the sages. And in general, during the Vedic times, including the time of Krishna presence during that period of time, which was Dwapara Yuga, all the personalities that after performing their religious life throughout their life, at the end, when they're actually searching for liberation, they travel north. And regularly, their travels lead them to these places. Haridwar. Haridwar means the gate to Hari. Dwara means gate, and Haridwar means a gate to the spiritual world. So it's places of liberation. So we have, that's where Vidura and Dhritarashtra and Gandhari went to perform the last rituals to obtain liberation. And in general, all the great personalities will go like that. And then there was Rishikesh and Badrikanashram. So in Badrikanashram, Vyasadeva, that was the place where Vyasadeva compiled the Vedas. That was the place. And in that, when we didn't have the fortune to go physically there, but we went there by listening. And so His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Swami took us into a hall by pictures. He had all these wonderful pictures of all the holy places. So he took us to the different places, including Vyasadeva Guha, which is the cave of Vyasadeva, where Vyasadeva, seated by the bank, they also, in Badrikanashram, there is where the Saraswati River starts. So Vyasadeva Guha, the cave of Vyasadeva, is very close to the origin of the Saraswati River, Goddess Saraswati is there. And so Vyasadeva went there to compile the Vedas. And because that region is presided and is protected, is under the shelter of Narada Rishi, then therefore the Bhagavatam is presided by them. That's one of the reasons. And then there's several explanations about the relevance of this avatar and the connection of this avatar of the Lord, Narayana Rishi, and the essence, the teachings of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is a scripture that was compiled under the instructions of Narada Muni to Vyasadeva, because Vyasadeva, when he went to the whole compiling of the Vedas, took that task. We hear in the story of the Bhagavatam, in the narration of the Bhagavatam, that he was dissatisfied even after compiling all the Vedas, including the Mahabharata. And then Narada Muni came and instructed him that he must compile a scripture that is solely focused on the glorification, the glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead exclusively, and the devotional service, the pure devotional service of the Lord. So the essence of the Bhagavatam is the relationship, it's about bhakti. It's the relationship between the devotee and the Lord. This relationship of loving service. One of the essential verses of the Bhagavatam spoken by Sutta Goswami is describing it's describing the nature of devotional of the living entity, the essence of the living entity. And that essence is Yato Bhakti Radokshaye, that is pure loving service to the personality of Godhead. So the essence of the Bhagavatam is this relationship, bhakti, the loving service, the loving connection between the living entity or the devotee and the Supreme Lord. And this avatar, Narayana Rishi, represents that relationship. Nara represents the topmost human being, or jiva. And Narayan represents the Supreme Lord. And the inseparable is the union, is the perfect union, connection between the living entity and the Supreme Lord. This avatar is that embodiment. The embodiment of that loving relationship. That loving relationship that manifests in the dialogues of the Srimad Bhagavatam between the devotees and the Lord, or between the representative of the Lord and the disciples. So the Bhagavatam is full of that. Another very important understanding that was explaining at that time is that same manifestation, that same essence of that connection, that union between the devotee and the Supreme Lord is manifested in Krishna and Arjuna, and is perfectly presented in the dialogue of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna and Krishna in different parts of the Vedas is described also as an appearance of Nara Narayana Rishi. So the essence is that they represent that eternal reality, the eternal connection, the loving relation that represent bhakti. Bhakti means that loving relationship between the devotee and the Lord. It's a personal relationship. Well, relationships is personal. Bhakti means love. Is devotion. Is loving devotion. That's what bhakti means. Yes, yes. So then Narayana Rishi taught that to Srila Narada Muni. Narada Muni received instructions directly on this principle of bhakti from Narayana Rishi. Specifically, it is explained about this term Naiskarmya. Naiskarmya is the essence of bhakti. When Srila Sutta Goswami described bhakti, he describes it as ahaitukiya pratiyata, that is uninterrupted and unmotivated. These two characteristics translate as Naishkarmya. It's the same thing. Naishkarmya is a combination of these two words, na and karma. So, no karma. There's no reaction. It's actions that produces no reaction. It's not inactivity, is very clearly explained. It's not inaction. It is action for the pleasure of Krishna. And that's Naishkarmya. It's a perfect combination of dharma and virtue. So when dharma is perfectly balanced with the qualities of virtue of the living entity that comes from Krishna, when those things are there, then you have pure devotion. And therefore, it's also very relevant that Sri Narayana Rishi appear from the combination of his father, Dharma, and his mother, Murti. Murti represents virtue, and Dharma represents religiosity, religious acting. So these two things have to be there. And specifically when we talk about virtue, the virtues that it is described by the teachings of our acharyas to be able to establish, to be established in bhakti, is this ahaitukiya pratiyata. There's no motivation. There's no personal, well, better to say, there is no selfish motivation. The motivation is to give pleasure to Krishna. And Narada Muni received this instruction directly from Sri Narayana Rishi. And then he passed that to Vyasadeva. And Vyasadeva then compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam after, being able to follow the instructions of Narada and fully realize this truth and being able to compile it in the form of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's extremely relevant, the connection that is there with with the great avatar Sri Narayana Rishi. So we can talk a little bit about this concept of Naishkarmya, which is sort of central to the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Especially in the Bhagavad Gita, which is like ABC for us, Krishna explains so thoroughly about this principle of Naishkarmya. Starting with the 3rd chapter, he makes a point that it could be subtle to understand what is Naishkarmya. The term that he uses is also akarma. So what is akarma, what is karma, and what is bikarma? So it is important to someone who wants to progress in the path of spiritual self-realization to understand these three, to make a difference. What is bikarma, what is karma, and what is akarma. That's something that Krishna explains when we talk about karma, is this, that there is no reactions. When you act in such a way that there is no bondage. Karma creates bondage. So karma is activities that are prescribed, that are religious, that are according to the principles of religion, that you act piously and you receive a reaction for that, you receive a reward. And there is bikarma, which is activities that are prohibited by the scriptures. So a progressive person have to have a proper understanding of these three things. So Krishna is explaining this to Arjuna in order to help Arjuna understand, because Arjuna had a conflict to understand what is the right thing to do when he was faced with the task of the battlefield, the war of Kurukshetra. So he wanted to know what is the right thing, what is dharma. And Krishna explains, his fear, Arjuna's fear is that, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be doomed. Because I have to kill, and if I kill all these persons, many of them, the great majority, are my family members. Their friends, my teachers are there, and I have to kill. So there's going to be a reaction for that. So I'm going to have to suffer that reaction. So regardless, his calculation was like this: if I win, I lose, and if I lose, I lose. So there's no sense for me to engage in this action, in this battle. If I win, I lose because I'll be suffering the reactions of all the disruptions that I'm making, not only in my dynasty, but also in all these kingdoms. He explains that. He gives, good arguments why, this is going to create a great havoc in society. The massive killings of leaders. And, he says, how can I enjoy the kingdom when all the people that I want to enjoy with are dead and I kill them? So I lose. And if I lose, I lose. I'm dead. So he was making these calculations. And like in the purport, it is explained that, Prabhupada explains, that either from the beginning or from the end, it will be miserable when you actually acting with a selfish motive. When there is a motive that is a personal motive, there's going to be a reaction. There's going to be something that you have to deal with. So, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna the whole science of how to act, because this is something that he told Arjuna after telling Arjuna, that in the beginning of Krishna's instructions, you're not the body, you're a spirit soul. After explaining these Atma Tattva principles, then he goes to say to Arjuna, now listen carefully, I'm going to explain to you a science, a very ancient science, an imperishable science, the imperishable science of yoga, I'm going to explain to you. In this science, when you learn this science, you should be able to act in this world without becoming entangled in the reactions of work. So listen carefully, he said. Listen carefully now. And then he goes on to explain the principles of this Naishkarmya, how to act without being entangled. Same principle that Naranarayana Rishi teaches and exemplified by the actions. Same thing. Krishna is explaining this principle to Arjuna. And as he goes on to explain that, he tells Arjuna that when you act not for the service of Krishna, when you don't understand who is the enjoyer of action, and you're trying to do it for yourself, there will be bondage. But if you do it for the pleasure of Krishna, understanding that He is the enjoyer of the results of that action, then you're free. He says, Jagyartha karmano nyatra. That Jagya Artha is the name of Krishna. He is the beneficiary of the beneficiary of Jagya, of all type of sacrifices. He is. So, Jagyartha karmano nyatra, all these actions should be done for the pleasure of the enjoyer of sacrifices, Krishna. So, lokoyam karma bandhanam, that if it's performed otherwise, if it's not for his pleasure, then karma bandhana means, bound by karma. That's a result. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu have to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, also, Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction. And in that way, you will always remain free from bondage. That's a principle. So the whole Bhagavad Gita is a presentation of how to do this, how to learn this science. And of course, as the conversation goes, there's elements that Krishna presents that are required for being able to learn this science. And after establishing this in chapter 3, he goes on to tell Arjuna that the science this imperishable science of yoga descends or comes through the vehicle by which that knowledge comes to you is through the disciplic succession. Evan parampara pratam imar rajarshajo vidhu, that Krishna delivers this imperishable science through a lineage, a parampara, a lineage of teachers to disciples, like that. And in order to be able to access that imperishable science, one has to approach a representative of that lineage. So, the whole Bhagavad Gita is about that. The whole Bhagavad Gita encourages and is basically a message to us, the human beings, that are represented by Arjuna, that are represented by Nara, then that this science, this nice karma science, is for us to learn. To learn how to act in this world in a way that we are not going to be sort of entangled by the reactions. Narada Muni then explains that to Srila Vyasadeva. Narada Muni, when he came to Vyasadeva, and one of the things that he told Vyasadeva was this, in terms of, again, Naishkarmyam. He says, this is in the first canto, chapter 5, text number 12. Naishkarmyam apyachuta bhava varjitan. Naishkarmyan apyachuta bhava varjitan. Na shobate jnanan alam niranjanam. Kuta puna swasat abhadram ishware. Nacharpitan karmajat apya akaranam. He said, Narada Muni to Vyasadeva, knowledge of self-realization, even though free from all material affinity, does not look well if devoid of a conception of the infallible God. So he defines Naishkarmya to Vyasadeva. In this translation is self-realization, being free from the reactions of fruitive work. That's how Prabhupada translated. So, this knowledge of self-realization, if it's disconnected from the conception of a personal, the personal conception of the absolute truth, then Narada said that doesn't look good. That doesn't cut it. And that's what he's making a case to Srila Vyasadeva to properly explain the principle of Naishkarmya. Because Vyasadeva had compiled all the Vedas, but is not, although the whole thing is there, but it's not clear. It can lead to a lot of confusion. Because Naishkarmya means it could be, people would take it as inaction, renunciation. They see like that. Narayana Rishi are the embodiment of renunciation, and they teaching that. But in reality, they teaching Naishkarmya, devotional service, loving devotional service. And Narada Muni is telling Vyasadeva, now you can understand that better. You can explain it better. You can explain it very clearly. So, he says that if it's disconnected from that personal relationship, that eternal loving connection between the living entity and the Supreme Lord, then that doesn't cut it. It doesn't look well. Knowledge of self-realization, even though free from all material affinity, even if it's in the transcendental space, does not look well if devoid of a conception of the infallible God. What then? So then he say, what then? So that's when we talk about, transcendence. The yogis and the jnanis. What then to the karmis, fruitive workers? What then is the use of fruitive activities which are naturally painful from the very beginning and transient by nature if they are not utilized for the devotional service of the Lord? That's the whole principle. That's the whole essence of their teaching, the teaching of Sri Narayana Rishi. That without the proper conception of this relationship, this loving relationship, Yato Bhaktir Adokshaye Ahaitukiya Pratiyata, this principle, if it's not there, then it's not going to do it. There will actually be reaction. There won't be freedom from the reactions. Even a transcendentalist who achieve liberation in the impersonal Brahman will fall down again if he hasn't properly take shelter of the lotus feet of the infallible personality of Godhead. Adho nadritan jusman angrajaha. Very soon they fall down from the position, that position, if they don't worship and take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Even that, even those people, even those living entities that achieve that goal, they fall down too. Back into the material world. They fall down. That's what the scripture says. That's what Bhagavatam says. So, then, what to speak of fruitive worker, which is the great majority of the Vedas is about karma kanda. So, Srila Narada Muni is making a case to Srila Vyasadeva why he should compile the Bhagavatam that is exclusive about bhakti, the bhakti dharma. So, and that's the same thing he received from Narayana Rishi. So, Srila Narada Muni concludes that for those who are conditioned by fruitive desires, and this is the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and the teachings of our Lord Chaitanya, this yukta vairagya, that one actually acts for the pleasure of Krishna, and the result, one practice actually to renounce the desire to lord over and to feel and to enjoy the fruits of our actions, and being able to offer all those to Krishna for his pleasure. And then when it's like that, then that is Naishkarmya. I stop here. Any comments or questions? Yes, Subala Prabhu. Wait for the microphone.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. You were mentioning about Narada and Vyas Samvad, the discussion between Narada, and you said that Neshkarmyam api achyuta bhava varjitam. So, even after hearing the drawbacks of writing so many scriptures which mention about the mukti and other aspect of Purushartha, which Vyasdev has written in his all scriptures, still we see that Vyasdeva still retain those scriptures, rather than which Narad Muni was saying that you have done a harm in one sense, because people will not follow the regulations, they will do it, the sense gratification, they will do the sense gratification in your name, because you have written it, so they will say that it's written in the scriptures. So in one sense, Narad Muni has very much strongly condemned those scriptures by even saying that it is a places of pilgrimage for crows, these books. Then why Vyasdev didn't give up all those books away and just kept Srimad Bhagavatam for the people, so that there will not be any confusion? Just like many people says, many of different religions says that we have only one book.
Exactly.
So no confusion.
Yes.
But here there are so many books and there is so much confusion.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
why did Vyasadeva not accepted the advice of Narad Muni?
Yeah, that's a very good observation. In fact, we hear same question when people ask, there has been so much conflict among different religions, and then if we say that it is just one God manifesting different paths of religions, then why he does that? Why not giving the just one religion, and then no one have to fight against, my God, your God, my path, this and that. There's no confusion. So it's the similar type of question. And the answer to the question, at least to that, in terms of the many religions paths that are there, is the principle of diversity. That because there is diversity, it's a real thing. In the material world, there's diversity. And because of diversity, then the Lord provides for different types of people the means by which they can elevate themselves. And it's bona fide. It's a manifestation of His kindness. Now, we as devotees, we're being taught, our Vaishnava Acharyas, and one of the greatest example of managing diversity from as impeccable Vaishnava view is Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his writings. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the visionary for Krishna consciousness going into the world. And that means that you have to provide something that takes into consideration so many the diverse cultures and backgrounds of the whole world. So he embraced diversity, but he talked about this simultaneous thing, that there will be diversity, but there's a common thing that unifies us all. And that is that essential loving relationship with God. So it's the same principle of the Bhagavatam, of the Vedas. You have all that diversity, all those different scriptures that deals with the different modes of nature. and provides instructions for different classes of people according to their, there's 90 something combinations of the modes of nature, and there's something for everybody. But at the end is, what is that thing, that essential thing that is going to unify us all? So the task of our Vaishnava Siddhanta is to be able to balance these two things, to embrace diversity, unity in diversity, like that, Achintya Veda Veda Tattva, to have that sort of vision that we can appreciate that diversity and accept it, embrace it, but at the same time be very much situated in that position of understanding that, the Samadarshana position. We all spirit souls that have an eternal relationship with Krishna. And different peoples will have different timings. So some people will need to grow to the yoga ladder that are presented in the Vedas. But then Narada Muni tells Vyasadeva, the reason you're not satisfied about that wonderful work is that in Kali Yuga, it's going to be almost, you have to give there have to be something that allows people to overpass that whole thing and being able to be established in that position of the highest connection that is there, in which now you have a balance, like that. Yes.
What you are saying, I literally agree, because yes, when we give choices, many choices of different, just like in Krishna, in Gita also says to Arjun, Yathechasi tatha kuru, that now I have explained you everything, now you decide
now
what
you
to do.
choose, yes.
Now that is kind of a Vyasadeva's statement, like I have given you all the scriptures, now choose whatever is according to your likings and inclination. But that is not, which I feel, that is not a real understanding of giving a thing, giving a right understanding to the person, because ultimately a person chooses that thing which allows certain kind of sense gratification. So what Krishna does to Arjun, when Krishna gave that option, Yathechasi tatha kuru, do whatever you want now, Arjuna was still confused what to do. There Krishna took compassion and then said, Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam. Now forget everything, just surrender unto me and do what I say. So that is the real compassion and real love for Arjuna that has been shown. Similarly, if a father says to a child, so these are the options, choose whatever you want according to liking and inclination. It may happen that the child may not take a proper decision and he may spoil his life. But being a compassionate father, a father will always say, I know this is best for you, better you take that. So similarly, Narada is also saying that to Vyasadeva, that people in Kali Yuga are not intelligent enough to understand what is good for them. Better you give only one thing, which is all much better, which is always good for them. But still Vyasadeva didn't agree with that. And he still gave that all the scriptures, even though he compiled, wrote Srimad Bhagavatam, but at the same time he also maintained those scriptures. Wouldn't it be better that Vyasadeva have discarded all the scripture and only kept Srimad Bhagavatam? That is my...
Yeah. I think the principle of ichcha or choice have to be there for us. Otherwise, there have to be something that, Krishna can do like this and say, you become a devotee and that's it. We're all devotees. But then the principle of ichcha, which allows, the loving sentiment to actually manifest, is not going to happen. Yes. It's very nice when you said, you brought up Krishna, the Sarvadharman, after Arjuna giving the choice. The Bhagavatam serves the same thing. Bhagavatam is the expansion of Sarvadharma, Parityaja, and offers the same thing for the sincere seeker. The Krishna, don't worry about it. You take shelter of me, I take care of everything. So that's the Bhagavatam. And for those who are followers of the Vedas, you always have the choice. You always have at least that offer of the Lord. So in one sense like that. But I think to answer to your question, or to at least add to what you bring it up, which is very, very nice, is that I think what I understand is the principle of choice. This principle is required. That's why for diversity, then we are going to present it, okay, you still have the responsibility to choose. But I'm giving you here, almost a no-brainer. You take shelter of me, I take care of everything. Vaishnava Sivananda Prabhu.
I'm just thinking, thank you for your class. There's a lot of information packed in the class that even I haven't never heard it put together so in order from beginning to end. So say a person that just walks through the door, and back in the day you used to be able to, from the age of 5, you could be taught all these things. Right now, there's you may speak once a week, another person speaks Bhagavatam. There's so much stuff going on, a person can never hear a structured presentation of the absolute truth. So, what would you say is, what if a person just comes in and they're like, what is this? How can a person nowadays, because we didn't even touch on Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya appearing to show the practical application of everything. So, how does a person, what does ISKCON can do, what can we do to help a person go from 0 and get what they need? Because there's so much, it's simple for the simple, but there's so many possibilities to miss everything. So how would you approach a person that just walks in the door? They're not 5 years old, and raise them to perfection.
I am a fervent believer of the temple ashram. When we study Srila Prabhupada's 7 purposes of ISKCON, the majority is about education. We're an institution that is a center for spiritual education, for the education of these principles of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, And the temple ashram it's almost like it was designed for that, for people who were sincere seekers. They will, even whatever time they will spend in the ashram, will actually learn the whole culture of Krishna consciousness. So, unfortunately, we see, this tendency, especially in many of the temples in the West, that the temple ashram is disappearing. So the ashram as an institution of education. And I think it's very important for temples to establish that. There's no such a thing of having a temple. Then we become more or less a place for people to come and worship, but not a place of education. Because as you said, people comes once a week, and then they listen, and they benefit from that. But to learn the science, to learn all these things, that help us, we have to have, very system of educations established, structure education. And we're trying to do our best with that in the communities. But on the other hand, the presence of an ashram, a brahmacharini ashram, is very, very important. So hopefully we can see that manifested again in the future. The devotees who have the fortune of being trained in a proper ashram is life-changing. We see that in India it's very strong, big ashrams, brahmacharini ashrams. Yeah, not many brahmacharinis in India and ashram, but some temples. But when I came up, I was a very strong brahmachari ashram, and it was we got well trained and life changing. And the idea that yes, in India it's easy to establish an ashram because people are naturally religious and pious, and they're inclined. They have, also a natural inclination for renunciation. But here in the West, people don't have that type of inclinations or character. That's not true. When I joined, it was mostly Westerners, and a lot of them, they will go and join the ashrams. And, we didn't hear anything about Krishna ever, or what to speak of the Krishna culture, and then we get trained in the Krishna culture. And it was nice, you learn all the things in terms of the life, the simple life of ashram, and that continues through your life when you become a grihasta, I always make the example, a simple example. It's a little gross, but is true. It's so part of the culture. Copings. You get through the simplicity and the cleanliness of using copings. And I've been now for 40-something years. That's the only thing I use, copings, because I don't know anything else. You get transformed. It becomes part of your culture. So that's a necessity. So while we don't have, to address your question, we don't have ashrams and a proper educational ashram in our temples, we have to do our best to tax our intelligence to teach people. Like we have Srimad is doing Bhagavad Gita courses teaching like that. We're trying to do something in these yoga centers, and things like that, courses of Bhagavad Gita. I sent my spiritual master a course that I put together for the yoga center of Bhagavad Gita, and he sent me back just one quote, in terms of encouragement. He says, the quote that Krishna said, those who teach these imperishable signs of the Bhagavad Gita to others, there's no one more dear to me, Krishna says. So, like in this verse, Sri Narayana Rishi not only teach, but also act, chara-charam. So it's not just teaching, but also acting, achar and prachar. Krishna Arjan, you have something to add?
Perhaps it's more on a light note, but in the purport there was mentioned that that desire for fruitive activity, it gets eroded, and the only way it can get eroded is really through coming into contact with bhakti yoga or devotional service. So you were bringing up the point that Narayana Rishi is seen as teaching renunciation, but in actual fact he's teaching bhakti yoga. So clearly the effect of bhakti yoga is that erosion of that drive for fruitive activities. So it's very powerful.
It's very powerful.
Yeah, so maybe that connects to Sri Vallabha bringing up all these particular sections of the Vedas that actually address persons who wish to keep going on that path of fruitive activity, because actually it's not a simple switch to devotional life for many. At least I've come into contact with persons that will not move from that position, even if there is exposure to devotional life. Perhaps there's appreciation, but from a distance, the pursuit of performing ritualistic sacrifices to achieve fruitive results continues with full fervor. So one can't deny the existence of that section of the population.
Yeah, it's a good point. Therefore, it's tragic if we, the institution that is part of the Chaitanya tree, that is due to expose people to the Srimad Bhagavatam daily, the transformative power of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the teachings of Krishna, is tragic if we're not performing that duty properly, or we're neglecting a little bit on that duty, and we just falling a little bit into just rituals. Our activity is to expand the message of Godhead into the world with Sankirtan. So that's the thing. That's, exists because of diversity, but the Bhagavatam is there to completely take care of that. And us as servants, again, is to bring the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita to the people out there and expose them and, figure it out how they can be exposed consistently. And then they can come back to a proper path. Thank you so much, everybody. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Thank you very much also for being here.